In this video, I'm going to look at all the trig equations, all the different types that you're given so that you can distinguish between them all. But before we start solving trig equations, we've got to be aware of a couple of things. We need to know our exact values, we need to know our sine graph and our cos graph. So those two things are really important. So we'll start off with the special trig equations. So trig equations that end with 0, 1 or minus 1. So if anything is equal to 0, 1 or minus 1. Those trig equations don't have an angle in a quadrant. They're at the interface of a quadrant. So for example, 90 degrees is not in quadrant 1, it's between quadrant 1 and quadrant 2. So for all of those equations, we've got to use those two graphs. So we'll have a wee look at some of them just now. First one might be sine x equal to 0. So there's your sine graph there. We go to 0 and we go along until we find the graph. So there's one point there, there's another point there, and there's another point there. So if sine x is equal to 0, then x has got to be 0, 180, or 360. If cos x is equal to 0, then we go to 0 and we find the graph. So there it's there, and there it's there. It's halfway between 0 and 180, which is 90. And between 180 and 360 is 270. So when cos x is equal to 0, our answer is 90 and 270. Likewise, if we have got sine x equal to 1, so we go to 1, we follow it across, we mark our graph. That angle in there is 90. So if sine x equals 1, x equals 90. The next one, if cos x is equal to 1, we find 1 on the graph, we read across, there's two places where it's 1. The first one is when x is equal to 0, and another one is when x is equal to 360. Minus 1, we'll do the same. When sine x is equal to minus 1, there's the sine graph, there's minus 1, so we follow it across to find the graph and read up to the axis, and that gives me 270. When cos x is equal to minus 1, we go to minus 1, we find our graph, there it's there, minus 1, read up, and that is 180 degrees. So it's really important that you know all of those equations. Now, the next thing is you've got to know all of your exact values. Now, you either remember them through these two wee triangles. That starts off as an equilateral triangle. All sides are equal to 2 and all angles equal to 60, but we split it in half to make a right angled triangle. And we've got 2, 1, and that would be root 3, because using Pythagoras is 2 squared minus 1 squared. You take the square root. The other triangle, we make it a right angle triangle with two 45-degree angles. Each side is 1. The hypotenuse is the square root of 1 squared plus 1 squared. So you either remember those two triangles, or there's all the information on your graph, on your table, sorry. So either way, you've got to know them. Now, there's other angles that you've got to know the values of, the exact values of, and that's the ones that are related to our 30, our 45 and our 60. So the ones related to 30, if we go into quadrant 2, that's 180 minus 30, and 180 minus 30 is 150. If we go into quadrant 3, that's 180 plus 30, which is 210. And when we go into quadrant 4, that is 360, take away 30 is 330. So you need to know the ones that link to 30 degrees. So you need to know all the ones that are related to that. Now, if we know that sine 30 is a half, okay, we've got it in our exact value table, it's down there, there's sine 30 is a half, then all of these ones will be a half as well, but there'll be 2 of them will be positive and 2 of them will be negative. And to find out which ones are positive and which ones are negative, we'll look at a cast diagram. And the cast diagram tells me that in quadrant 1 and quadrant 2 sine is positive. So that's positive, and it means the other 2 are negative. So you have to be able to do that to work out those other ones that are related. Now, likewise, when we've got sine 45. Sine 45 is 1 over root 2. And you either get that from your table or you get it from your triangles. So 45 degrees, sine 45 is 1 over root 2. Now it means all of the angles related to 45 are going to also be 1 over root 2. but we're going to find out what they are. So in here, 180 take away 45 is an angle of 135 degrees. In here, if we do 180 plus 45, it's 225. And in here, if we do 360, take away 45 is 315. So you're expected to know all of those ones as well. Now I know because 45 is 1 over root 2, I can write 1 over root 2 in each of these. And then I have to decide which ones are positive and which ones are negative. So I'm back to that cast diagram again. Quadrant 1, quadrant 2, sign is positive, so that's positive, positive, that's negative, and that's negative. Now we'll do the 60-degree one. So if we've got an angle that is an acute angle of 60 degrees, in quadrant 2 its related one is 180 minus 60, which is 120. In quadrant 3, 180 plus 60 is 240. And in quadrant 4, 360 minus 60 is 300. Now, on this page, all of those angles, either write them down in your information sheet so that you're aware of them. Those are the only ones then you can be asked. Those ones and the ones that are on your graph. So we're now going to look at sine 60. So there's 60 degrees down the bottom. Sine 60 is root 3 over 2. You've got to be able to get that in your exam. So I've got root 3 over 2. That's going to be root 3 over 2 as well because they're all related. So they've got the same numerical value, but 2 of them will be positive and 2 of them will be negative. So we'll look at our cast diagram again. And in quadrant 1, quadrant 2, we know that sine is positive. So that's positive, that's negative, and that's negative. Now, I'm going to labour the point because I'm going to do the same for cos and I'm going to do the same for tan because there's a lot in that. But as long as you know these related angles and you quickly write them down on your information sheet, you've got your exact values. I suggest that you write that in your information sheet as well. Then all of this you can quickly work out. So we'll now move on to tan. Oh, sorry, we'll do cos first. So cos 30, there's 30 degrees, there's cos is root 3 over 2. So I know they're all going to be root 3 over 2. We'll do the angles first before I start filling them in. Angle related to 30, we did it before, is 150. Angle related to 30 in the third quadrant is 180 plus 30 is 210. Angle related in the fourth quadrant is 330. So again, just the same as what I did before. So I now know that they are all root 3 over 2, root 3 over 2, and root 3 over 2. But I want to know which ones are positive and which ones are negative, because there'll always be 2 that are positive, there'll always be 2 that are negative. So we're talking about cos this time. So where is cos positive? In quadrant 1 and quadrant 4. So that one's positive and that one's positive, and it means the other 2 are negative. Now I've put wee plus signs in there, you obviously don't need them. Next one, we've got the 45. We've already gone through this. 180 minus 45 is 135. 180 plus 45 is 225. 360 minus 45 is 315. Now, all I have to do is know cos 45. And I can work out the rest of them. So cos 45 is 1 over root 2. So they're all going to have a numerical value of 1 over root 2. 1 over root 2. 1 over root 2. Now I've got to decide which ones are positive and which ones are negative. So I'm talking about cos. So cos is positive in quadrant 1, quadrant 4. So there's a quadrant 1, 1. There's a quadrant 4. The other 2 are negative. So last one here, we've got 60 degrees. 180 minus 60 is 120 degrees. 180 plus 60 is 240 degrees. 360 minus 60 is 300 degrees. That's all the angles repeated again. Now I want cos 60. Cos 60 is a half. There it's down there. So 60, cos 60 is a half. So they're all going to have this numerical value of a half. But 2 of them are going to be positive and 2 of them are going to be negative. So using a cast diagram, which ones are going to be positive and which ones are going to be negative? Well, cos is positive in quadrant 1 and quadrant 4, so that one's a positive one, that one's a positive one, and those 2 are negative. Last variation, and you cannot be given any other variation in all of these ones. And I know it seems quite a lot, but they're all done the same way. So again, we've got 150 degrees related to 30, we've got 210 related to 30, and look at 330 related to 30. So we want tan 30 degrees, so we'll find tan 30 degrees. So there's 30 degrees, there's tan, and it's 1 over root 3. So they're all 1 over root 3. So that's 1 over root 3, that's 1 over root 3, that's 1 over root 3, and that's 1 over root 3. But 2 of them are going to be positive and 2 of them are going to be negative. So we'll look at our cast diagram. Tan is positive in quadrant 1 and quadrant 3. So quadrant 1 is positive, quadrant 3 is positive, the other 2 have got to be negative. Tan 45, angles related to that are 135, 225 and 315. We've been through that twice already, so you should be becoming aware of what those are. Now tan 45 is equal to 1, so they're all going to be equal to 1, but 2 of them are going to be plus 1 and 2 of them are going to be negative 1. So where is tan positive? Tan's positive in quadrant 1 and quadrant 3. So it's positive in quadrant 1 and it's positive in quadrant 3. So it means the other 2 are negative. Tan 60, if we look down to find tan 60 is root 3. So they're all going to be root 3's, root 3, root 3, root 3, and root 3. But 2 of them are going to be positive and 2 are going to be negative. Where is tan positive? It's quadrant 1 and quadrant 3, so that one's positive and that one's positive, and it means that's negative and that's negative. Now the tan ones have got implications for you doing gradient, because the angle that a line makes with the positive direction of the x-axis is equal to the gradient. So you could be given something where you have to work out the gradient of a line that makes an angle of 30 degrees and 150 degrees, 45 degrees, 135 degrees, 60 degrees and 120. So you need to know all of them. Okay, that could come up with paper 1. Right, we'll now look at some equations. For these ones, I'm going to stick with exact values. So the first one here, we want to solve the following equations. It's all in degrees. It's between x is between 0 and 360 degrees. So we've got sine x as a half. If it's a non-calculator paper, you know it's got to be an exact value. So the acute angle is equal to 30 degrees. Then we decide using a cast diagram, which quadrants have we got an angle where the sine is positive, and sine is positive in quadrant 1 and quadrant 2, so I've got an answer in quad 1 and quad 2. So in quad 1 it's going to be 30 degrees, and quad 2 it's going to be 180 minus 30, which is 150 degrees. Always write your answers down at the bottom in a wee line, so x is 30 degrees and 150 degrees. So the next one, we've got cos x is equal to root 3 over 2, so we do acute angle, and our acute angle, so we're looking for cos root 3 over 2, and it's 30 degrees as well. So we now want to know where cos is positive, so we'll do a cast diagram, there it's there, and where is cos positive? Quadrant 1 and quadrant 4. So in quadrant 1 we've got an angle of 30 degrees, in quadrant 4 I've got 360 minus 30, which is 330 degrees. Tan x equal to 1 over root 3, so tan x equal to 1 over root 3, acute angle again is 30. So we'll go through the same things to repeat this. Now I want to know where tan is positive. So tan is positive in quadrant 1 and quadrant 3. So in quadrant 1 we've got an acute angle which is 30 degrees. In quadrant 3 we've got 180 plus 30, which is 210 degrees. So that's your basic trig equations. That's the one with just an x. No difficult parts in that. That's more like your National 5. But you will do that in your higher as well. So next type, I'm still sticking with exact values and no calculator. But this time we've got 2x's, 2x's, 2x. Okay. So as soon as you've got something with 2x or 3x or 4x, you've got to take into account the period of the graph. So that means that there's two full graphs in 360, so the period of that graph is going to be 360 divided by 2, so it's 180. So that means every answer repeats after every 180 degrees. So when we solve our equation, we'll get 2 answers, but this thing should have 4 answers because it's always got double the number that's in here. Just like those ones we did a minute ago, when it was sine x with 2 answers, when it was 1x with 2 answers, when it was 1x with 2 answers. So if we've got 2x, we want 4 answers. Now we do exactly the same, we rearrange this. So I've got root 2 sine 2x degrees. I'm going to add 1 on to both sides, so that's equal to 1. I don't want root 2 times sine 2x, so we're going to divide by root 2. So sine 2x degrees is equal to 1 over root 2. Now, we do the same as what we did before. We forget that it's 2x, and we say the acute angle is equal to sine to the minus 1 of 1 over root 2. Now, we know from our exact values that that is 45 degrees. Now, it's positive. Sine was positive. Okay, so we always put a wee cloud around this bit. So sine is positive. So using a cast diagram, where have I got answers? So if sine is positive, I've got an answer in quadrant 1, and I've got an answer in quadrant 2. So in quadrant 1, that's okay. It's 45 degrees, it's the acute angle. In quadrant 2, it's 180 minus 45, which is 135 degrees. Now, normally, you would be finished at this point, but it's not x that's there, it's 2x. So what you have to do is you have to say, well, 2x is equal to 45 degrees, or 2x is equal to 135 degrees. And then you've got to work out what 1x is, so you divide by 2. So x is equal to half of 45 is 22.5 degrees, and 1x is equal to half of 1. So half of 135 gives me 67.5 degrees. Now it's answer, we're solving for x, so these are our 2 initial answers. That's them. But we know the period of the graph was 180, so you've got to add on 180 degrees to both of them, and that will give you your other 2 answers. So you're adding on 180 to both of them. So the other value for x is 180 onto that is going to be 202.5. 180 onto that one is going to be 247.5 degrees. So I've now got 4 answers. I'll write them down, and usually start writing them from the lowest. So 22.5 degrees, 67.5 degrees, 202.5 degrees, and the last one there is 247.5 degrees. We now have another trig equation, and it's cos 2x, so we're going to have to think about the period of this graph as well. So the period of this graph is 360 divided by 2 is 180 degrees. So when I get my final answers, I've got to add on 180 degrees. Because it's 2x, I expect 4 answers. So if you just get all of these things clear in your head before you start, then it makes life a bit easier. We're going to rearrange that to get cos 2x. So I'm taking 1 away from both sides, and I'm going to divide by root 2. Now, we ignore the negative, and we do the acute angle, and the acute angle is going to be cos to the minus 1 of 1 over root 2. That's going to be 45 degrees. So now we've got cos, and this time cos is negative. So we think of a cast diagram, and where is cos negative? Well, cos is positive in there and in there, so it's got to be quadrant 2 and quadrant 3. So I've got an answer in quadrant 2, I've got an answer in quadrant 3. In quadrant 2, it's 180 minus 45, which is 135. And in quadrant 3, it's 180 plus 45, which is equal to 225. So that should be my 2 answers. But it wasn't x, it was 2x, so we do 2x is equal to 135 degrees, or 2x is equal to 225 degrees. Now I want to work out what x is, so I'm going to divide both of them by 2. So half of 135 is going to be 67.5 degrees, and half of 225 is 112.5 degrees. So only when you get to the x bit, everything else above that we don't really want. It's just helping us get an answer. So once we've got to x, we know we've got to add on this 180, because that was the period of the graph. So x value, 180 onto that, is going to be 247.5 degrees. 180 onto that is going to be, that would give me 292.5 degrees. And at the end, always list your answers in order, usually smallest to largest, but you'll not be penalised. So 67.5 degrees, 112.5 degrees, 247.5 degrees, and 292.5 degrees. I'm going to do another one where we've got a 3x involved in it. You don't always get ones with 3x and 4x's, but just in case it comes up, then I'll do one. So we've got cos 3x degrees. Now always keep a wee eye on the domain. That means where your answers lie. Okay, so it could be something like that, and that just means all the answers between 0 and 360, but also equal to 0 and 360. If you've got lots of different answers, sometimes they cut that down and they might make it between 0 and 180. So keep a wee eye on that so that you don't write answers in that you don't need. Right, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do acute angle. So acute angle is cos to the minus 1 over half. So cos to the minus 1 over half gives me an acute angle of 60 degrees. Cos is positive. Where is cos positive? Cast diagram again. Cos is positive in quadrant 1 and in quadrant 4. So in quadrant 1, the answer is 60 degrees. In quadrant 4, the answer is 360 minus 60 is 300 degrees. Now that would be my two answers, but it's not x, it's up here, it's 3x. So we do 3x is equal to either 60 degrees or 3x is equal to 300 degrees. So I'm going to work out what 1x is. So x is 60 divided by 3 is 20 degrees, and divide by 3 again, x is equal to 100 degrees. Now, that's my two answers, but because it was 3x, I expect 6 answers. So we think about the period of the graph. So the period of the graph is 360 divided by 3, which is 120. So I've got to keep adding on 120s. You should only have to do it twice. So we'll add on 120. And when I add 120 onto that, I get another 2 answers. One from this one of 140. And 120 onto that gives me another one, which would be 220 degrees. I need to add on another 120. So when I add 120 onto that one, I get 260. And when I add 120 onto the other one, I get x is equal to 340 degrees. So that's my 6 answers. I line them all up and underline them in the test. So 20 degrees, 100 degrees, 140 degrees, 220 degrees, 260 degrees, and 340 degrees. Okay, so why did we get 6 answers? We got 6 answers because it was 3x and it's always double that amount. When we've got 3x, we've got to work out what the period of the graph is. So it's 360 divided by that number. So answers repeat every 120 degrees. So we have to keep adding on 120 until we've got all the answers that lie between 0 and 360. Now, they will all be the same. So get your acute angle, get your 2 quadrants, but then go back and say, well, it's not x that's in here, it's 3x. Solve for x. Put a wee line under there, because that's when you start adding on the period of the graph, when you've got those. Okay, I'm still sticking with exact values, so we'll rearrange this one. So these are ones where we've got a number inside the bracket. We're taking away an angle or we're adding on an angle. So same routine, we rearrange. So sine x minus 25, and I'm just ignoring that bit just now, is equal to 1 divided by root 2. So I want to do the acute angle, and it's shift sine of 1 over root 2. And when I do shift sine of 1 over root 2, I get 45 degrees. So sine is positive. There's the sine bit there. It's positive. It's plus 1 over root 2. So answers are in quadrant 1 and quadrant 2. In quadrant 1, it's 45 degrees. In quadrant 2, it's 180 minus 45 degrees, which is 135 degrees. Now, I would be finished, but it wasn't x that was there. It was x minus 25 degrees. So x minus 25 degrees is 45 degrees, or x minus 25 degrees is 135. And then we've got a wee simple equation to solve. Add on 25 to each side. So adding 25 onto that gives me 70 degrees. Adding 25 onto that side gives me 160 degrees. It was only a 1x. I expect two answers. I've got my two answers. So x is equal to 70 degrees, or x is equal to 160 degrees. Now, sometimes when you have got some angles and you take away, if that being plus something and you take it away and you end up with a negative answer, all you do is you add on 360, or you add on the period to bring it back into a positive answer. If it's out with 360, take away 360 and I'll bring it back into that period. Right, we'll do this part B one. So part B, we've got root 2 cos x plus 10 plus 1 is equal to 0. So we're going to rearrange that one to get cos x plus 10 degrees. And I'll take 1 away from both sides, so that's negative 1. I'll divide with root 2, it's minus 1 over root 2. So we want the acute angle. So acute angle is cos to the minus 1 of 1 over root 2. Forget the negative, because that's only telling me what quadrants my answers are in. So when I do that, I get 45 degrees. Now I'm going to look at cos here. So cos is negative. So in the cast diagram, where is cos negative? Well, cos is positive in quadrant 1, quadrant 2, so it's got to be negative in quadrant 2 and quadrant 3. Quadrant 2, how do I get into it? It's 180 minus 45, it's 135 degrees. Quadrant 3, how do I get into quadrant 3? It's 180 plus 45, which is 225 degrees. I would be finished, but it wasn't x that was here, it was x plus 10. So I solve a simple equation. X plus 10 degrees is equal to 135, or x plus 10 degrees is equal to 225. Don't want that plus 10, we'll take 10 off both sides, so that's 125 degrees, and x is equal to 215 degrees. I've got two answers. It was a 1x, so I'll expect two answers.